The signal came from a small blue planet in the outer rim of what the locals called the Milky Way galaxy. It was weak, barely strong enough to reach the nearest listening post of the Zenthari hegemony. The message was simple, just numbers arranged, in a pattern that even a child could understand. Basic mathematics. Prime numbers. Nothing impressive. Commander Vexithai read the report while sipping his morning nutrition fluid aboard the massive space station that orbited the Zenthari homeworld. His four eyes scanned the data with mild interest before setting it aside. Another primitive species had discovered radio waves. This happened several times each cycle across the galaxy. The planet was called Earth by its inhabitants. The species called themselves humans. From what the long-range sensors could detect, they were bipedal mammals with basic tool-making abilities. They had only recently figured out how to split atoms and had barely managed to send crude metal objects beyond their own atmosphere. Barely. Above stone-throwing savages, Vexithai muttered to himself. He marked the file as low priority and moved on to more important matters. The Zenthari Empire had real problems to solve. Trade disputes with the Korthak Federation, resource allocation across 400 star systems, and the endless paperwork of running a galactic civilization. 3 days later, the report landed on the desk of Chief Xenobiologist Rath Sin. She was responsible for cataloging new species discovered by the Empire's vast network of listening posts and exploration vessels. Her laboratory was filled with specimens from across the galaxy, everything from gas-based intelligence to silicon-based hive minds. Rathsin pulled up the human file and studied the intercepted transmissions more carefully. The creatures seemed to communicate through sound waves and primitive electromagnetic signals. They had developed nuclear weapons but hadn't figured out how to use atomic energy safely. Their longest space flights lasted only a few days. What caught her attention was their behavior. The humans seemed unusually aggressive for such a primitive species. Their planet was divided into hundreds of separate territories, each controlled by different groups that frequently fought each other. They had weapons designed specifically to kill members of their own species. Some of their entertainment involved watching combat between individuals. "Interesting," she said to her assistant, a young Zenthari named Colvin. "These humans show signs of significant aggression, but their technology level is remarkably low. They're still burning fossil fuels for energy." Colvin looked at the data, streams flowing across their screens. Chemical rockets, radio waves, nuclear fission, all technologies the Zenthari had mastered thousands of years ago. "Should we classify them as a potential threat?" Rathsin laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Threat? With that technology level? I doubt they could threaten a cargo transport, let alone a military vessel. No, mark them as Category 5 primitives. Standard colonization protocols should apply." The report moved up the chain of command. It crossed the desks of regional administrators, military planners, and resource allocation specialists. Each one came to the same conclusion. Earth was inhabited by a species so technologically backward that they posed no meaningful resistance to Zenthari expansion. But Earth had something the Empire needed. Deep space mineral surveys revealed massive deposits of rare elements in the planet's crust. More importantly, the star system sat at the intersection of 3 major hyperspace lanes. Control of that junction would cut shipping times across the outer rim by 30%. Admiral Sinvara received the colonization order during a routine fleet exercise. Her task force was conducting training operations near the frontier when the communication arrived from High Command. Establish Zenthari. Control over the human homeworld. Relocate the native population to suitable reservation worlds. Begin resource extraction operations. It was the kind of routine assignment the Zenthari fleet handled dozens of times each year. Most primitive species surrendered immediately when faced with superior technology. The few that resisted were quickly overwhelmed by weapons they couldn't understand, let alone counter. Sinvara assembled her officers in the flagship's main briefing room. The space was vast, designed to accommodate the Zenthari's tall, graceful forms. Holographic displays showed the target system in 3 dimensions. "The mission is straightforward," she began, her voice carrying the authority of decades commanding starships. One star system, single habitable planet, approximately 8 billion inhabitants. Technology level suggests they've barely achieved basic spaceflight. Commander Theclor, her tactical officer, studied the human spacecraft designs with amusement. Chemical propulsion? Primitive metal construction? Admiral, our shuttlecraft are more advanced than their largest vessels. Indeed. Intelligence estimates suggest a single heavy cruiser could control their entire planet. We're taking a full compliance fleet simply to speed up the relocation process. Sinvara gestured to the fleet roster. 20 ships, enough firepower to reduce a planet to molten rock. The Zenthari had perfected the art of peaceful conquest long ago. Show overwhelming technological superiority, offer the natives a choice between cooperation and destruction, then relocate them to worlds better suited to their primitive lifestyle. Most species saw reason quickly. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Sarah Chen was having a very bad day at the Luna Observatory. The Deep Space Monitoring Array had been detecting strange energy signatures for the past week, massive objects moving at impossible speeds through the outer solar system. Run the calculations again, she told her research assistant, Marcus Webb. There has to be an error in the sensor data. Webb shook his head as he double-checked the numbers. I've run it 6 times, Dr. Chen. The objects are approximately 2 kilometers in length, moving at significant fractions of light speed, and they're heading directly toward Earth. Chen stared at the data displays surrounding her workstation. The Luna Observatory was humanity's most advanced deep space monitoring facility. Its sensors could detect objects the size of aircraft from beyond Pluto's orbit. But what they were seeing made no sense according to known physics. If these readings are accurate, we're looking at artificial objects with technology far beyond anything humans have ever developed, she said quietly. Should we report this to Earth Command? Webb asked. Chen hesitated. The last time the observatory had reported unusual readings, it turned out to be a malfunctioning sensor array. She'd spent 3 months defending her competence to a board of inquiry, but these readings were different, consistent across multiple sensor types, verified by backup systems and growing stronger by the hour. Send a preliminary report to the Deep Space Monitoring Division, she decided. Mark it as unconfirmed pending additional verification. The report arrived at the United Nations Space Command during a heated budget meeting. General Patricia Williams, commander of Earth's fledgling space defense network, barely glanced at it before filing it with dozens of other routine reports. Another false alarm from the Luna Observatory wasn't worth interrupting discussions about the new Mars colony supply schedule. But Colonel Marcus Wright, Williams's intelligence advisor, had learned to pay attention to unusual reports. His job was to identify potential threats to human space operations, no matter how unlikely they seemed. He pulled up the Luna Observatory's data and studied it carefully. Wright had been a fighter pilot before joining the intelligence corps. He'd learned to trust his instincts about danger, even when the evidence seemed impossible. Something about these readings bothered him. The objects were too large, too fast, and moving in too organized a formation to be natural phenomena. He placed a secure call to Dr. Chen at the Luna Observatory. Doctor, this is Colonel Wright from Space Command Intelligence. I need to ask you about your recent deep space detection report. Chen's voice carried barely controlled excitement. Colonel, I'm glad someone is taking this seriously. We've been tracking these objects for 8 days now. They're definitely artificial, definitely under intelligent control, and they'll reach Earth orbit in approximately 6 weeks. Wright felt a chill run down his spine. Have you shared this information with anyone outside official channels? No, sir. Just the standard report to Deep Space Monitoring. Good. Keep it that way for now. I'm sending a classification order for your data. Nothing about these objects gets released without my authorization. After ending the call, Wright sat in his office staring at the sensor data. If Dr. Chen was right, humanity was about to have its first contact with an alien intelligence. And if these aliens had the technology to build ships the size of cities and push them to near light speed, they were so far ahead of human science that any encounter would be entirely on their terms. Wright began making quiet preparations. He activated emergency communication protocols with key military leaders around the world. He authorized increased readiness levels for Earth's orbital defense platforms, disguising the orders as routine training exercises. Most importantly, he began identifying personnel who could be trusted with humanity's greatest secret. 6 light-years away, Admiral Sinvara's fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the human solar system. Their advanced sensors immediately began mapping the system's defenses and technological capabilities. What they found exceeded their expectations for primitive development. The humans had established colonies on several worlds and had built a modest network of space-based infrastructure. "Impressive for savages," commented Commander Teclor as he studied the tactical displays. "They've managed to spread beyond their homeworld." "Barely," Sinvara replied. "Look at their propulsion systems, chemical rockets and basic ion drives. It must take them months to travel between their own planets." The Xanthari fleet began its approach toward Earth, confident in their overwhelming technological advantage. Their weapons could destroy mountains, their shields could deflect nuclear weapons, and their sensors could track objects the size of asteroids from across star systems. But they made one crucial error in their assessment of humanity. The Xanthari measured intelligence and capability purely through technological advancement. They assumed that any species using primitive technology must be primitive in all ways. They never considered that humans might have developed in directions the Xanthari had long ago abandoned. They never imagined that a species still using chemical explosives might understand the fundamental principles of physics in ways that advanced civilizations had forgotten. Back on Earth, Colonel Wright's network of trusted personnel had grown to include scientists, military officers, and engineers across the globe. They called themselves the Prometheus Group, after the mythological figure who stole fire from the gods to give to humanity. Dr. Chen had become the group's primary source of intelligence about the approaching alien fleet. Her continuous monitoring revealed ships of impossible size moving with impossible precision. The aliens clearly possessed technology that made humanity's greatest achievements look like children's toys. "We have perhaps 5 weeks before they arrive," Wright told the assembled group during a secure video conference. "We have no idea what their intentions are, but we have to assume the worst. If they're hostile, Earth's conventional defenses won't even slow them down." Dr. James Morrison, a physicist from MIT, studied the alien ship schematics Dr. Chen had compiled. The energy signatures suggest they're using some form of exotic matter manipulation. Probably gravitational field. Control for propulsion. We're looking at technology that's centuries ahead of our current capabilities. "So what do we do?" asked General Linda Foster, commander of the European Space Defense Initiative. "Surrender immediately and hope they're benevolent?" Wright shook his head. "We prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. If these aliens are peaceful, our preparations won't matter. If they're not, our preparations might be humanity's only chance for survival." The Prometheus Group began working in absolute secrecy. They couldn't risk public panic or government interference. Their mission was simple: develop contingency plans for defending Earth against technologically superior aliens. They had no idea that their fears were entirely justified. The approaching Xanthari fleet carried colonization equipment designed to strip Earth of its resources and relocate its human population to barren mining worlds. To the aliens, humans were nothing more than primitive animals to be managed and exploited. Admiral Sinvara reviewed the colonization timeline as her fleet approached the inner solar system. Phase 1 would involve demonstrating Xanthari technological superiority to Earth's governments. Phase 2 would be negotiations for peaceful surrender, backed by the implicit threat of annihilation. Phase 3 would begin the actual relocation and resource extraction operations. The Admiral expected the entire process to take no more than 6 months. After all, what could primitives do against the might of the Xanthari Empire? She was about to discover that sometimes being primitive meant being unpredictable. And unpredictable enemies were the most dangerous kind of all. The first sign of the aliens' arrival came at 1432 Greenwich Mean Time on a Tuesday. Every radio telescope on Earth detected the same massive energy signature emerging from behind the moon. Dr. Sarah Chen watched her instruments go crazy as something the size of a small city dropped out of faster-than-light travel just inside lunar orbit. My God, whispered Marcus Webb, her research assistant. It's real. They're actually here. Within minutes, similar signatures appeared across Earth's orbital space. Ships materialized from nothing, their sleek forms unlike anything in human engineering. The largest vessel stretched over 3 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull gleaming with an opalescent finish that seemed to shift colors in the sunlight. Admiral Sinvara stood on the bridge of her flagship, studying the primitive world before her. Earth hung in space like a blue-white jewel, exactly as the long-range surveys had described. Continents covered with green vegetation, oceans teeming with life, and a thin atmosphere that would be perfect for Xanthari colonization once the current inhabitants were relocated. Begin the standard first contact protocol, she ordered her communications officer. Intercept their primitive transmissions and construct a basic translation matrix. We'll address their leadership within the hour. The Xanthari had performed this routine hundreds of times across the galaxy. Show up with overwhelming force, demonstrate technological superiority, then offer the natives a simple choice: peaceful relocation or total annihilation. Most species chose relocation. On Earth, every government's emergency protocols activated simultaneously. Air raid sirens wailed in major cities. Military forces around the world went to maximum alert status. The President of the United States was rushed to a secure bunker beneath the White House, while similar scenes played out in capitals across the globe. Colonel Marcus Wright received the alert while reviewing intelligence reports in his Pentagon office. He immediately activated the Prometheus Group's emergency communication network, sending coded messages to scientists and military personnel around the world. After weeks of preparation, humanity's secret resistance network was ready to respond. "This is it," he said during an encrypted video call with Dr. Chen. "How many ships are we looking at?" Chen's voice was tense as she read from her instruments. 20 vessels of various sizes. The largest appears to be their command ship. Colonel, the energy readings from these vessels are off the charts. They're using technology that makes our best fusion reactors look like campfires. Wright nodded grimly. The Prometheus Group had spent weeks developing contingency plans, but seeing the alien fleet in person made their preparations seem pathetically inadequate. How could human technology possibly compete with ships that could travel between stars? The aliens didn't keep humanity waiting long. At exactly 16:00 GMT, every television, radio, and internet connection on Earth simultaneously displayed the same image: a tall, graceful being with pale blue skin and 4 eyes standing in what appeared to be the bridge of a spacecraft. "Greetings, inhabitants of the world you call Earth," the being said in perfect English, though its mouth movements didn't quite match the words. "I am Fleet Commander Vexthai of the Xanthari Hegemony. We come in peace to offer you the benefits of galactic civilization." President Janet Morrison watched the broadcast from the White House Situation Room, surrounded by her top advisors and military commanders. The alien's appearance was both beautiful and unsettling, clearly intelligent, clearly advanced, but completely inhuman in ways that made her skin crawl. "We have observed your species for some time," Vexthai continued. "Your recent achievements in atomic energy and space travel have brought you to our attention. The Xanthari Hegemony extends an offer of protection and guidance to your people." General Patricia Williams, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, leaned toward the president. "Madam President, this could be the greatest opportunity in human history." Morrison nodded slowly, but something about the alien's tone bothered her. The creature spoke of offers and protection, but its massive warships hanging in Earth's orbit suggested a different kind of relationship. Vexthai gestured gracefully as he continued his broadcast. "In exchange for Earth's inclusion in our galactic community, we ask only for administrative custody of your world's resources. Your people will be relocated to worlds better suited to your current development level, where you can grow and learn under Xanthari guidance." Dr. Chen felt her blood turn cold as she listened to the alien's words. "Relocated?" she whispered to Colonel Wright over their encrypted channel. "They want to move 8 billion people off Earth?" Wright's response was grim. "It gets worse. Look at the subtext. They're talking about taking our planet and shipping us somewhere else like we're refugees in our own solar system." But most of Earth's leaders heard only the promise of advanced technology and galactic citizenship. The alien demonstrated casual miracles during his broadcast, healing a dying plant with a wave of his hand, creating complex objects from thin air, manipulating gravity to make water flow upward. Your primitive medical science causes unnecessary suffering, Vexthai explained as he demonstrated advanced healing technology. Zenthari medicine can cure any disease, reverse aging, even regrow lost limbs. Your energy crisis would end with access to our power sources. Faster than light travel would open the galaxy to human exploration. President Morrison found herself mesmerized by the possibilities. Imagine curing cancer with a touch. Imagine clean, unlimited energy. Imagine exploring distant stars as easily as traveling to the next city. The choice is yours, Vexthai concluded. Accept our guidance and join the galactic community as a protected species. Or remain isolated on this single world, struggling with primitive technology while the universe passes you by. The broadcast ended, leaving Earth's leadership to debate humanity's response. Most governments were overwhelmed by the aliens' obvious technological superiority. Why resist beings who could cure diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries? But Colonel Wright and the Prometheus group weren't convinced. Wright had spent years studying military history, and the aliens' offer reminded him of historical examples he'd rather forget. European colonizers offering protection to indigenous peoples usually just before enslaving or destroying them. We need more information, he told Dr. Chen during an emergency Prometheus group meeting. These aliens are being very careful about their choice of words. They talk about administrative custody and relocation, but they never explain exactly what that means. Dr. James Morrison, the group's lead physicist, had been analyzing the alien ship's energy signatures. I've been studying their technology, and something doesn't add up. These ships are incredibly advanced, but they're using brute force solutions to problems we've learned to solve more elegantly. What do you mean? Wright asked. Their propulsion systems are based on massive energy expenditure. They're essentially forcing reality to bend around them through raw power. But there are more efficient ways to manipulate space-time that they don't seem to know about. Wright felt a spark of hope. Are you saying their technology has weaknesses? I'm saying their technology evolved differently than ours. They've focused on energy manipulation and exotic matter control, but they might have gaps in areas we've explored more thoroughly. Meanwhile, negotiation teams from major world governments were preparing to meet with the aliens. The Zenthari had agreed to land diplomatic shuttles at the United Nations headquarters in New York, where formal discussions about Earth's future would begin. President Morrison assembled her best diplomats and scientists for the historic meeting. Secretary of State David Chen led the American delegation, while similar teams from China, Russia, the European Union, and other major powers prepared their own positions. But unknown to the official negotiators, Colonel Wright had activated a different kind of team. The Prometheus group had placed surveillance specialists in positions where they could monitor the alien-human talks. If the Zenthari were hiding their true intentions, Wright intended to discover them. Dr. Sarah Chen had modified the Luna Observatory's sensor array to eavesdrop on alien communications. The Zenthari ships were constantly transmitting data between vessels, and while the signals were encrypted, patterns in the transmissions might reveal useful information. I'm picking up massive data transfers between their ships, she reported to Wright. Whatever they're discussing, it's detailed enough to require significant bandwidth. Wright's surveillance team, led by NSA cryptologist Amanda Foster, had positioned listening devices around the UN building. If the aliens said anything revealing when they thought humans weren't listening, the Prometheus group would hear it. The first formal meeting between humans and aliens took place in the UN Security Council chamber. Fleet Commander Vexthai arrived, with a small delegation of Zenthari officers, their tall forms elegant and intimidating in the human-sized space. We are pleased by humanity's interest in joining galactic civilization, Vexthai began. The relocation process can begin immediately. We have prepared suitable worlds and systems better matched to your species' current capabilities. Secretary Chen asked the question that had been bothering many of the human negotiators. Commander, could you be more specific about these relocation worlds? What exactly are we being offered? Vexthai's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture the humans couldn't interpret. The worlds we have selected feature climates similar to Earth, with adequate resources to support human populations. Your people will be free to develop their own communities under Zenthari guidance. But what about Earth itself? Asked the Chinese representative. This is our home. Our entire history is tied to this planet. Earth contains resources vital to galactic commerce, Vexthai replied smoothly. The planet's location makes it strategically important for hyperspace navigation. However, your people will be well compensated for any inconvenience. Dr. Chen, monitoring from the Luna Observatory, noticed something disturbing about the alien communications during the meeting. The data transmissions between Zenthari ships spiked every time human negotiators asked difficult questions. The aliens were clearly coordinating their responses in real time. They're not negotiating, she told Wright over their encrypted channel. They're managing us. Every answer is being calculated and approved by their entire fleet. Wright's worst suspicions were confirmed when Amanda Foster's listening devices picked up unguarded alien conversations during a break in the negotiations. The Zenthari delegates thought they were speaking privately, but advanced human surveillance technology was recording every word. The primitives are asking more questions than expected, one alien said to another. Should we accelerate the timeline? No, replied what sounded like a senior officer. Let them believe they have a choice. Once the relocation begins, resistance will be impossible. A third alien voice joined the conversation. The resource extraction equipment will arrive within 60 days. We need the humans off-planet before full-scale mining operations begin. Wright felt sick as he listened to the recording. The aliens weren't offering humanity partnership. They were planning to steal Earth and use humans as slave labor on distant worlds. But the worst revelation came when the aliens discussed human resistance capabilities. Intelligence reports indicate some human military preparation, one Zenthari officer noted. Should we be concerned? The response was dismissive laughter. What could primitives do against our technology? Their most powerful weapons couldn't scratch our lightest shields. If they become troublesome, we'll simply demonstrate the consequences of resistance. Wright realized that humanity had perhaps days before world governments agreed to surrender. The aliens' technology was clearly superior to anything humans possessed. But the Prometheus group had been preparing for exactly this scenario. Emergency. Meeting all cells. He transmitted to the resistance network. It's time to activate contingency plans. Dr. Morrison's physics team had spent weeks analyzing alien technology for potential weaknesses. Their conclusion was disturbing but offered a glimmer of hope. The Zenthari had become so dependent on advanced technology that they'd never developed certain fundamental sciences that humans had mastered. Their shields are based on exotic particle manipulation, Morrison explained during the emergency meeting. But they're designed to deflect energy weapons and kinetic projectiles. I don't think they've ever encountered certain types of electromagnetic interference. What kind of interference? Wright asked. The kind humans discovered by accident during our primitive radio experiments a century ago. Wright began to smile, for the first time in days. Sometimes being primitive had advantages that advanced civilizations never considered. 3 months after the Zenthari arrival, Earth looked like a different world. Massive alien structures rose from former cities, their curved walls gleaming with the same opalescent finish as the ships in orbit. The aliens called them processing centers, where humans underwent evaluation for relocation to appropriate worlds. President Morrison stood on the balcony of what had once been the White House, watching Zenthari construction vehicles reshape the landscape around Washington, D.C. The aliens had been polite but firm. Human governments could maintain ceremonial authority, but all real decisions now came from Fleet Commander Vexthai. The first transport ships will arrive next week, her aide informed her. Commander Vexthai expects to begin relocating populations from major metropolitan areas. Morrison nodded wearily. The aliens had demonstrated their power too clearly for meaningful resistance. When the governor of Texas had attempted to organize military opposition, a single Zenthari ship had precisely vaporized an abandoned military base from orbit. The message was clear: cooperation or annihilation. But unknown to the world's surrendered governments, Colonel Marcus Wright's resistance network had spent those 3 months preparing for war. The Prometheus Group had evolved from a small collection of concerned scientists and military officers into a global underground organization with cells on every continent. Dr. Sarah Chen worked from a hidden facility beneath the Swiss Alps, her original Luna Observatory equipment relocated and expanded. She monitored alien communications constantly, learning more about Xanthari technology and intentions with each passing day. "They're not just stealing our planet," she reported during a secure video conference with Wright and other resistance leaders. "I've intercepted shipping manifests for the next phase of their operation. They're planning to extract Earth's entire molten core for rare minerals." Wright felt his stomach clench. "How long do we have?" "Based on their timeline, they want all human populations relocated within 6 months. Then they begin core extraction. Earth becomes an industrial mining site." Dr. James Morrison, the physicist leading the Resistance's technical development, had made disturbing discoveries about humanity's future under Xanthari rule. By hacking into alien databases, his team had learned about other species that had accepted Xanthari protection. "The Vorthak were relocated 800 years ago," Morrison reported. "Their population has declined from billions to roughly 50 million. They work in Xanthari mining operations across the galaxy. The Xanthari consider them useful but expendable labor." "What about the others?" asked General Linda Foster, who now commanded the Resistance's military planning. Similar stories. "The Kalani were relocated to agricultural worlds and turned into food producers. The Threnodi became construction workers for Xanthari infrastructure projects. In every case, the original species' culture and independence disappeared within a few generations." Wright studied the intelligence reports with growing determination. The aliens weren't offering humanity a partnership, they were planning genocide, disguised as benevolence. But the Resistance had been busy during those 3 months. Working in absolute secrecy, they had identified and exploited weaknesses in Xanthari technology that the aliens themselves didn't know existed. Dr. Morrison's breakthrough had come from studying electromagnetic pulse effects on alien equipment. "Their quantum-based systems are vulnerable to specific frequency combinations," he explained to Wright during a clandestine meeting in an abandoned subway tunnel beneath New York City. "The Xanthari never developed EMP technology because they bypassed the entire electromagnetic spectrum during their technological evolution. They went straight from primitive tools to exotic matter manipulation. They never learned to defend against radio frequency interference because they never invented radio." Wright grasped the implications immediately. "You're saying we can crash their systems using technology they consider obsolete?" "Exactly. But it has to be precisely calibrated. Too little power and their systems will adapt. Too much and we only affect local equipment. We need a coordinated electromagnetic pulse across very specific frequencies to create a cascade failure." The Resistance had spent months building EMP devices from salvaged electronics and hidden them across the globe. Each device was disguised as space debris, abandoned satellites, or industrial equipment. The Xanthari's sensors were designed to detect advanced threats, not primitive electromagnetic transmitters. But creating the weapons was only half the battle. The Resistance needed intelligence about when and where to strike for maximum effect. That intelligence came from an unexpected source. Dr. Chen's monitoring efforts had revealed that 2 additional Xanthari fleets were approaching Earth. Not the small compliance force currently in orbit, but massive expeditionary fleets carrying enough firepower to conquer entire star systems. "Fleet Admiral Kethmore commands the first wave," Chen reported during an emergency resistance meeting. 200 warships, including heavy battle cruisers and planetary bombardment vessels. They're bringing enough military force to crush any conceivable human resistance. "What about the second fleet?" Wright asked. Fleet Admiral Sinvara leads the industrial fleet. 150 ships loaded with mining equipment, orbital factories, and core extraction machinery. Once they arrive, Earth's destruction becomes irreversible. Wright realized that humanity had perhaps weeks before the window for resistance closed forever. Once those fleets arrived, even a successful EMP attack would only delay the inevitable. When do they get here? He asked. Admiral Kethmore's fleet drops out of hyperspace in 18 days. Sinvara's industrial fleet arrives 3 days later. The resistance faced an impossible choice. They could attack the current occupation force, but that would alert the incoming fleets and eliminate any chance of surprise. Or they could wait for all 3 fleets to arrive and attempt to cripple the entire Zenthari force with one coordinated strike. We wait, Wright decided. If we're going to do this, we do it right. One chance to hit them when they're not expecting primitive humans to fight back. But waiting required the resistance to watch helplessly as the Zenthari accelerated their relocation operations. Transport ships arrived daily, loading human populations for shipment to distant worlds. Families were separated, communities destroyed, and Earth's cities emptied of their inhabitants. Amanda Foster, the Resistance's intelligence chief, infiltrated one of the processing centers by posing as a volunteer coordinator. What she discovered there convinced even the most optimistic Resistance members that negotiation with the aliens was impossible. They're not relocating humans to garden worlds, she reported after escaping the facility. I saw the shipping manifests. Adults are being sent to mining colonies with life expectancies measured in years, not decades. Children are separated for education and integration into Zenthari society. Slavery, Wright said quietly. They're turning us into slaves and taking our children. Foster nodded grimly. It gets worse. I overheard Zenthari technicians discussing the next phase. Once Earth's population is below 1 billion, they begin atmospheric modification to make the planet more suitable for Zenthari colonization. The Resistance realized they weren't just fighting for human independence. They were fighting for human survival. Meanwhile, Fleet Admiral Kethmore reviewed his battle plans as his massive fleet approached the Sol system. Intelligence reports suggested that human resistance had been minimal. A few scattered protests, some ineffective sabotage attempts, but nothing that posed a serious threat to Zenthari operations. The primitives seemed to have accepted their situation, his tactical officer reported. Ground commanders report cooperation from most human governments. Kethmore studied the tactical displays showing Earth's orbital defenses, a handful of primitive space stations, some basic missile systems, and scattered military installations. Nothing that could threaten a single Zenthari cruiser, let alone an entire fleet. What about the human military forces? He asked. Mostly deactivated or absorbed into the compliance structure. There are reports of some military personnel disappearing, presumably deserters, unable to accept the new reality. Kethmore dismissed the concern. Deserters were a common problem during planetary acquisitions. A few humans hiding in caves couldn't threaten an operation involving 3 complete fleets. But those deserters were actually the core of humanity's resistance network. Colonel Wright had carefully recruited the most capable and dedicated military personnel from around the world. Officers like General Foster, who had commanded the European Space Defense Initiative. Specialists like Commander Sarah Walsh, a former submarine warfare expert who understood how to fight enemies with superior technology. The Resistance had also attracted Earth's brightest scientists and engineers. Dr. Morrison's physics team included researchers from MIT, CERN, and the Japanese Space Agency. Dr. Chen's monitoring operation relied on astronomers and communications specialists from dozens of countries. Most importantly, the Resistance had recruited ordinary people who refused to accept humanity's surrender, teachers, factory workers, farmers, and students who volunteered for the most dangerous missions. They built the hidden EMP devices, smuggled supplies to resistance cells, and provided the intelligence network that kept the movement secret. We're not just fighting for ourselves, Wright reminded his team during their final planning meeting. We're fighting for every human being who will never be born if Earth becomes a Zenthari mining colony. The plan was called Operation Blackout, named for what would happen to Zenthari systems when the electromagnetic pulse cascaded through their quantum networks. Hidden EMP devices positioned around the globe would fire simultaneously when the alien fleets were in optimal position. Dr. Morrison had calculated the precise moment when the attack would be most effective. Both fleets will be in Earth orbit, along with the original occupation force. Over 350 alien ships in a concentrated formation, all connected through quantum communication networks. When they're all linked together, the upper EMP cascade will propagate through their entire fleet instantaneously, added Dr. Chen. Every ship, every weapon, every life support system will fail simultaneously. Wright felt the weight of humanity's future on his shoulders. How long do we have to implement the attack once the fleets arrive? Maybe 6 hours, Morrison replied. Once they finish docking procedures and establish orbital defensive positions, they'll begin core extraction operations. After that, even if we destroy their fleets, Earth will be uninhabitable. The Resistance made their final preparations as Admiral Kethmore's fleet approached the edge of the solar system. Hidden around the globe, thousands of Resistance members waited for the signal that would determine whether humanity lived as free beings or died as slaves. But the aliens had made one crucial error in their assessment of human capabilities. They assumed that technological superiority meant superiority in all areas. They never considered that a species they dismissed as primitive might understand fundamental principles of physics that their own advanced civilization had forgotten. They never imagined that humans would turn the aliens' greatest strength, their interconnected technology, into their greatest weakness. The Zenthari were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you underestimate completely. Fleet Admiral Kethmore stood on the bridge of his flagship as 200 Zenthari warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. The massive vessels emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with weapon arrays that could reduce planets to cosmic dust. "Status report," he commanded, his 4 eyes scanning the tactical displays that showed the primitive human star system spread before his fleet. "All ships report successful." "Transition, Admiral," his communications officer replied. "No system damage. All weapons and defensive systems online. The compliance fleet reports standard occupation operations proceeding on schedule." Kethmore nodded with satisfaction. This would be another routine expansion operation for the Zenthari Empire. Overwhelm the primitives with superior technology, complete the relocation process, then begin resource extraction. His fleet had performed similar operations across dozens of star systems, but hidden in a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, Colonel Marcus Wright watched the alien fleet's arrival with grim determination. The Prometheus Group's sensor network tracked each massive ship as it took position in Earth's outer orbital zone. 200 ships confirmed, reported Dr. Sarah Chen from her monitoring station. The largest vessels are approximately 4 kilometers in length. Energy signatures suggest they're carrying enough firepower to glass the entire planet. Wright felt the familiar weight of command responsibility. In 18 hours, Admiral Sinvara's industrial fleet would arrive with the equipment to strip mine Earth's core. Once that happened, humanity's homeworld would become uninhabitable regardless of who won the coming battle. "Signal all cells," he ordered. "Phase 1 of Operation Blackout is now active. All personnel to final positions." Across the globe, thousands of Resistance members received the coded transmission and began moving to their assigned locations. Scientists and engineers made final adjustments to hidden EMP devices. Military specialists took positions near critical alien installations. Intelligence operatives prepared to monitor enemy communications during the chaos that would follow. Dr. James Morrison checked the status of the primary EMP network from his hidden laboratory beneath the Swiss Alps. Months of preparation had culminated in this moment. Nearly 800 electromagnetic pulse generators positioned around Earth, each precisely calibrated to create a cascade failure in Zenthari quantum systems. "All primary nodes show green status," he reported to Wright. "The devices are drawing power from hidden sources and should remain undetected until activation." "What about the backup systems?" Wright asked. 150 backup devices in secondary positions. If the aliens detect and destroy our primary network, we have enough redundancy to complete the mission. The plan depended on perfect timing. The Resistance needed both alien fleets in orbit simultaneously, close enough for the EMP cascade to affect every ship at once. too early, and Admiral Sinvara's industrial fleet would escape to warn the Zenthari Empire. Too late, and core extraction would begin. Meanwhile, Admiral Kethmore reviewed intelligence reports about human resistance activities. His staff had detected some unusual electromagnetic emissions from Earth's surface, but the readings were dismissed as primitive industrial activity. The humans seemed to be maintaining some manufacturing operations, his science officer reported. Nothing that poses a threat to our ships, but their electromagnetic signatures are somewhat higher than expected for a subjugated population. Kethmore barely listened to the report. Human technology was so primitive that their most advanced equipment couldn't threaten a Zenthari shuttle, let alone a battle cruiser. His attention was focused on establishing orbital control and preparing defensive positions for the industrial fleet's arrival. Deploy the fleet in standard occupation formation, he ordered. I want complete sensor coverage of the planet and all approaches. Once Admiral Sinvara arrives, we begin final phase operations. The Zenthari warships moved into position with mechanical precision. Each vessel took its assigned coordinates, creating an orbital network that could intercept any threat from space or surface. Their advanced sensors swept Earth continuously, monitoring human activity and identifying potential resistance concentrations. But the alien sensors were designed to detect advanced technology. They easily spotted human military installations, spacecraft, and communications arrays. What they missed entirely were the primitive EMP devices hidden in abandoned buildings, disguised as industrial equipment, or buried in locations the aliens considered strategically worthless. Dr. Chen monitored alien communications from her hidden facility, listening to fleet commanders coordinate their operations. They're treating this like a routine expansion, she reported to Wright. No special security measures, no increased alert status. They genuinely believe humans pose no threat. Wright felt a cold satisfaction at the aliens' arrogance. The Zenthari had conquered hundreds of worlds using overwhelming technological superiority. They had never encountered an enemy that would turn their own advanced systems against them. What's our timeline for Sinvara's fleet, he asked. 17 hours, 32 minutes until hyperspace emergence, Chen replied. Based on standard Zenthari procedures, they'll need approximately 6 hours to establish orbital positions and begin core extraction operations. Wright did the math in his head. That gave the Resistance less than 24 hours to execute Operation Blackout. After that, Earth would be lost regardless of the battle's outcome. But the Resistance faced one final challenge. Admiral Kethmore's fleet had established communication links with the occupation forces already on Earth. If the EMP attack failed to disable every alien system simultaneously, the survivors could warn the approaching industrial fleet. Amanda Foster, the Resistance's intelligence chief, had infiltrated the Zenthari command center in what had once been Washington, D.C. Her mission was to monitor alien communications during the attack and ensure no warnings reached Admiral Sinvara's fleet. I'm in position, she reported over encrypted channels. The aliens have established a quantum communication array that links all their forces. If we can't disable it completely, they'll have real-time contact with ships outside the Sol system. Wright realized the stakes were even higher than he'd imagined. If Operation Blackout failed, it wouldn't just doom Earth. It would alert the entire Zenthari Empire to humanity's resistance capabilities. Future operations against human colonies would be prepared for EMP attacks. We get one chance, he told his command team. If this doesn't work, humanity doesn't get a second try. Hours passed as both sides prepared for what they didn't know would be a decisive battle. The Zenthari completed their orbital deployment, confident in their overwhelming advantage. The humans made final preparations for an attack the aliens couldn't imagine. Admiral Sinvara's industrial fleet arrived exactly on schedule, dropping out of hyperspace in the outer solar system with mathematical precision. 150 massive vessels emerged from faster-than-light travel, their hulls bristling with mining equipment, orbital factories, and planetary processing machinery. Industrial fleet has arrived, reported Admiral Kethmore's communications officer. Admiral, Sinvara requests permission to begin approach to Earth orbit. Kethmore granted the request without hesitation, Soon both fleets would be in position to begin the final phase of Earth's conquest. The primitive humans would be completely relocated, and industrial operations would transform their home world into a productive mining colony for the Zenthari Empire. But in the hidden bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, Colonel Wright received the signal he'd been waiting for. Industrial fleet is beginning orbital approach. All ships will be in optimal position in 4 hours, 18 minutes. Wright activated the final phase of Operation Blackout. Across the globe, resistance cells received their execution orders. Scientists made final calibrations to EMP devices. Military teams prepared to exploit the chaos that would follow them. Electromagnetic pulse. Intelligence operatives took positions to monitor the aliens' response. Dr. Morrison ran through his calculations one final time. The EMP cascade would propagate through the Zenthari quantum networks at the speed of light, disabling every connected system within seconds. But the timing had to be perfect. Fire too early and some ships might escape. Fire too late and core extraction would begin. All devices report ready status, he told Wright. We can execute on your command. Wright watched the tactical displays showing hundreds of alien ships moving into Earth orbit. Each vessel carried enough firepower to destroy human civilization. But they were about to discover that technological superiority meant nothing if your technology could be turned against you. Admiral Sinvara's flagship took its position in the center of the combined fleet formation. The industrial vessels began deploying massive machines designed to crack open planetary cores and extract the molten materials within. In a few hours, Earth would begin its transformation from living world to cosmic mine. Begin preliminary core mapping. Sinvara ordered her geological teams. I want extraction operations to commence within 6 hours. The Admiral had no idea that human resistance fighters were monitoring her every command. Dr. Chen's surveillance network tracked the industrial fleet's preparations, counting down the minutes until core extraction became irreversible. They're deploying core penetrators, she reported to Wright. Once those devices are active, they'll begin breaching Earth's mantle. We have maybe 2 hours before the damage becomes permanent. Wright made the hardest decision of his life. Operation Blackout would begin in precisely 1 hour, when both alien fleets were in optimal position. Every human resistance fighter around the world would activate their EMP devices simultaneously, creating a cascade failure that would cripple the entire Zenthari force. But if the plan failed, if the aliens' technology proved more resilient than expected, then humanity would face the combined fury of 350 alien warships with no chance of survival. Send the execution signal, Wright commanded. Operation Blackout commences in 60 minutes. The message flashed to resistance cells around the world. Hidden in bunkers, abandoned buildings, and camouflaged positions, thousands of humans prepared to discover whether their primitive technology could defeat the most advanced military force in the galaxy. Admiral Kethmore stood on his bridge, watching the industrial fleet deploy its massive machinery. Soon another primitive world would be added to the Zenthari Empire's resource base. The humans had been more cooperative than some species, accepting relocation with minimal resistance. He had no idea that in less than an hour, his mighty fleet would be reduced to floating debris, by technology the Zenthari considered obsolete. The aliens were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous weapon is the one your enemy thinks you don't have. At exactly 1432, Greenwich Mean Time, 800 electromagnetic pulse devices hidden across Earth fired simultaneously. The coordinated burst of radio frequency energy erupted from every continent, creating an invisible wave of electromagnetic interference that raced outward at the speed of light. Dr. James Morrison watched his instruments from the hidden facility beneath the Swiss Alps as the EMP cascade began. All primary devices have fired, he reported to Colonel Wright. Electromagnetic pulse is propagating through local space. The effect on Zenthari technology was immediate and catastrophic. Their quantum-based computer systems, designed to operate in the exotic matter realm, had never been hardened against primitive electromagnetic interference. The carefully calibrated frequencies struck their networks like a virus, cascading through every connected system. Admiral Kethmore was reviewing tactical displays on his flagship's bridge. when every screen suddenly went dark. Emergency lighting failed. Life support systems shut down. The massive warship that had been a pinnacle of technological achievement became a dead hulk floating in space. "What's happening?" he demanded, but his communication systems were dead. The quantum networks that connected his fleet had crashed completely, leaving each ship isolated and powerless. Similar scenes played out across both alien fleets. Admiral Sinvara watched in horror as her industrial vessels went dark one by one. Massive core extraction machines that had been preparing to crack open Earth's mantle suddenly powered down. Orbital factories designed to process planetary materials shut down completely. "Emergency power," she shouted to her crew, but there was no response. Even backup systems had failed as the EMP cascade propagated through every circuit, every quantum processor, every exotic matter conduit in the Xanthari ships. In the hidden bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, Colonel Wright received confirmation. Reports from resistance cells around the world. "EMP deployment successful across all zones," Amanda Foster reported. "Alien communications have gone completely silent." Dr. Sarah Chen monitored the electromagnetic spectrum from her facility, confirming what they all hoped to see. No alien transmissions detected on any frequency. Their quantum networks are completely down. But the humans knew they had only minutes before the aliens attempted to restore power. Emergency protocols would activate backup systems, and the Xanthari would realize they were under attack. The resistance had to exploit their advantage immediately. "Phase 2, execute now," Wright commanded. Across Earth's surface, human teams that had spent months positioning themselves near alien installations launched coordinated attacks. But these weren't conventional military strikes. They were precisely targeted operations designed to prevent the aliens from restoring power. Chemical explosives, considered primitive by Xanthari standards, destroyed quantum power generators that had no defenses against such crude weapons. EMP devices continued firing in rotating patterns, ensuring that any system the aliens managed to restart would immediately crash again. The Xanthari had built their entire technological civilization around exotic matter manipulation and quantum computing. They had shields that could deflect energy weapons and armor that could withstand kinetic projectiles. But they had no defenses against electromagnetic interference because they'd never considered it a threat. Admiral Kethmore struggled through his darkened flagship, trying to reach the emergency command center. The artificial gravity had failed, leaving him floating helplessly through corridors lit only by bioluminescent emergency strips. Around him, his crew members were suffocating as life support systems remained offline. "Manual override," he gasped to a junior officer floating nearby. "Find the manual override for life support." But there was no manual override. The Xanthari had become so dependent on automated systems that they'd eliminated manual controls generations ago. Their ships were marvels of technological integration, and that integration had become their fatal weakness. Dr. Morrison monitored the electromagnetic cascade from his hidden laboratory, watching as it continued to propagate through the alien fleet. "The effect is self-sustaining," he reported with amazement. "Their quantum networks are creating feedback loops that prevent recovery. Every time a system tries to restart, it crashes the surrounding network." Colonel Wright felt a moment of savage satisfaction as he watched the mighty alien fleets reduced to powerless hulks. But he knew the battle was far from over. "What's our timeline before they can restore communications?" "Based on the system architecture we've observed, they need to physically disconnect their quantum networks and restart each ship individually," Morrison replied. "That could take hours or even days." But hours were all the resistance needed. Human teams were already boarding the darkened alien ships, using simple tools and weapons that the Xanthari had never prepared to defend against. Cutting torches designed for industrial work breached alien hull materials. Chemical explosives destroyed critical systems. Simple projectile weapons eliminated any aliens who attempted to resist. Amanda Foster led a team into the Xanthari Command Center in Washington, D.C., finding the facility completely dark and lifeless. The aliens inside were struggling to breathe as their atmospheric systems failed. Most were unconscious or dying from oxygen deprivation. "Secure the facility," she ordered her team. "We need to prevent any communication with ships outside the solar system." The few conscious aliens offered no resistance. Without their technology, the tall, graceful Zenthari were helpless against primitive humans with simple weapons and determination. Admiral Sinvara managed to reach her ship's emergency beacon, a primitive backup system designed to function independently of the main quantum network. With her last conscious breath, she activated a warning transmission towards Zenthari space. "Emergency. All fleets. Humans have unknown weapon. Avoid Sol system." The transmission lasted only seconds before she collapsed, but it carried across space at faster-than-light speed toward the Zenthari Empire. But the warning would take weeks to reach the nearest Zenthari outpost, and by then the damage would be complete. The Resistance had identified which ships contained the most critical technology and personnel. Those vessels became priority targets for boarding operations. Dr. Chen's monitoring equipment detected the brief transmission from Admiral Sinvara's ship. "We have an outgoing communication," she reported to Wright. "Short burst transmission, faster than light. Probably a warning to Zenthari space." Wright nodded grimly. They had expected this possibility. "How long before that warning reaches its destination?" "Based on the transmission vector, approximately 3 weeks to the nearest Zenthari listening post. Then we have 3 weeks to complete our objectives." Those objectives had evolved beyond simply defeating the alien invasion. The Resistance had captured hundreds of advanced starships and thousands of Zenthari personnel. With careful study, humanity could reverse engineer technology that would make them equals to any galactic civilization. But first, they had to ensure the aliens could never threaten Earth again. Human boarding teams worked systematically through the darkened alien fleet. Most Zenthari were already dead from life support failure, but those who survived were taken prisoner for interrogation. The humans showed more mercy than the aliens had planned to show them. Prisoners received medical care and adequate food. Dr. Morrison's team began the complex process of analyzing Zenthari technology while their systems remained offline. "This is incredible," he reported to Wright. "Their materials science is centuries ahead of ours, but their basic electronics are actually inferior to human designs. How is that possible?" They skipped entire stages of technological development. They went directly from primitive tools to exotic matter manipulation without ever mastering electromagnetic engineering. It's like discovering fire without ever learning to make tools. The analysis revealed something even more important. Zenthari technology was designed around centralized control systems that could be accessed and modified. If humans could understand the control protocols, they could potentially take command of the alien ships. "We're not just defending Earth," Wright realized. "We're potentially capturing an entire fleet of starships." The implications were staggering. Humanity had gone from a single-planet species facing extinction to potentially possessing hundreds of faster-than-light capable warships. The balance of power in the galaxy was about to shift dramatically, but the humans also discovered the true scope of Zenthari cruelty. Interrogation of surviving aliens revealed the fate planned for humanity: permanent enslavement on barren mining worlds, with human children raised as Zenthari servants. The aliens had never intended to honor their promises of protection and advancement. Admiral Kethamore, captured alive when humans breached his flagship, provided the most damning testimony. "Your species was classified as useful livestock," he admitted during questioning. "The relocation worlds have no sustainable ecosystems. Your population would have declined to manageable levels within a few generations." Wright felt cold fury as he listened to the aliens' casual description of genocide. "How many other species have you done this to?" "Dozens. It's standard protocol for primitive civilizations. We take their resources and use their populations for labor until they're no longer useful." The interview was broadcast to human resistance cells around the world, ensuring that everyone understood what they had truly been fighting against. This wasn't a war between equals. It was a fight for humanity's very existence. Over the following days, human teams worked to restore basic functions to captured alien ships, while keeping their advanced systems offline. The vessels would serve as research platforms and eventually as humanity's first interstellar fleet. Dr. Chen's long-range sensors detected no additional alien ships approaching Earth. The EMP attack had been so successful that the Zenthari apparently believed their entire force had been destroyed by some unknown cosmic phenomenon. The aliens' final transmissions indicate they think we used some kind of exotic weapon, she reported to Wright. They have no idea that primitive electromagnetic pulses caused the Cascade failure. Wright smiled for the first time since the crisis began. Humanity had not only survived but had captured the very fleet sent to destroy them. The species dismissed as primitive had turned the tables on their would-be conquerors. But the victory came with sobering knowledge. Earth now knew it existed in a galaxy where advanced civilizations routinely enslaved or destroyed less developed species. The Zenthari hegemony controlled hundreds of star systems and would eventually send more forces to investigate the loss of their fleets. "We have work to do," Wright told his assembled commanders. "We need to reverse engineer this technology, train crews for interstellar ships, and prepare for the Zenthari Empire's response." The humans began broadcasting a message across all frequencies toward Zenthari space. It contained footage of the floating alien graveyards, testimonies from captured officers, and a simple warning. Earth was no longer defenseless, and humanity would remember what the Zenthari had planned to do to them. The message concluded with Admiral Kethmore's own words, taken from his interrogation. "We underestimated them completely. They turned our greatest strength into our greatest weakness. Mark the Sol system as forbidden territory. The humans are far more dangerous than we ever imagined." As reports of the victory spread to human colonies and outposts across the galaxy, enslaved human populations began planning their own resistance movements. Earth had shown that the mighty Zenthari could be defeated. Now it was time to liberate every human community from alien oppression. The darkness that had taken 2 alien fleets became the dawn of humanity's rise as a galactic power. The species once dismissed as primitive had proven that intelligence, determination, and the willingness to fight for survival could overcome any technological advantage. And in the depths of space, the Zenthari Empire received Admiral Sinvara's final transmission and marked the Sol system with a warning that would persist for generations. Extreme hazard, hostile primitive species. All ships maintain maximum distance. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not through surrender but through the absolute refusal to accept extinction. The end of the world began on a Tuesday, not with a bang or a whimper, but with thousands of dark shapes blocking out the sun. Captain James Stone stood on the roof of the North American Defense Command, binoculars pressed against his eyes. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the railing. The ships hung in the sky like massive black stones. They didn't move. They didn't make a sound. They simply existed where they should not exist. "How many?" asked General Walker, his voice unusually quiet. "Too many to count, sir," replied Stone, lowering the binoculars. At 42, Stone had seen his share of combat and crises, but nothing like this. His weather-beaten face showed the first signs of real fear his colleagues had ever seen. The radio on the general's belt crackled to life. "Sir, we're getting the same reports from all over the world. London, Beijing, Moscow, Johannesburg, Sydney, they're everywhere." Stone watched as a smaller craft detached from one of the massive ships. It descended toward the United Nations building in New York. The world held its breath. Dr. Emma Reed pushed through the crowd of scientists gathered around the monitors. As the head of the Defense Department's Xenobiology Division, she should have been prepared for this day. They had trained for it, planned for it, but deep down, most believed first contact would never happen in their lifetime. "It's broadcasting something," said her assistant Tom Miller, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Tom was young, barely 30, but was the best tech specialist the military had. His dark skin glistened with sweat as he worked to decode the signal. "Can you translate it?" Emma asked, brushing a strand of graying hair from her face. "I don't need to," Tom replied, looking up with wide eyes. "It's in English." The message played across every screen, every radio, every phone on Earth at exactly the same time. People of Earth, we are the Vex. Your world is now under our protection. Resistance will be met with correction. Acceptance will be rewarded with life. You have one Earth Day to present your leaders for processing. The message repeated 3 times before silence fell again. Processing, Emma whispered. The word sent chills down her spine. The world's governments debated for exactly 20 hours before reaching a decision. Stone sat in the back of the emergency session, watching as leaders from every nation argued, threatened, and finally reached the only possible conclusion. We fight, said the American president, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. Humanity does not surrender. Stone nodded. In grim satisfaction, he had never voted for her, but in this moment he felt a swell of pride. The response was sent exactly 3 hours before the Vex deadline. It was simple. Earth belongs to humanity. We choose freedom. The Vex replied with fire. The first attacks targeted military installations. Stone watched from the underground bunker as live feeds showed bases around the world going dark. There was no explosion, no dramatic battle. The Vex ship simply passed overhead, and everything electronic died. Then came the ground forces. They weren't what anyone expected. Not the lizard-like creatures of science fiction, or the gray humanoids of conspiracy theories. The Vex foot soldiers were mechanical, but moved like living things. 8 feet tall, with 4 arms and smooth, featureless faces that somehow still managed to look cruel. They're not robots, Emma insisted, studying the footage. There's something organic inside them, some kind of pilot or essence, but there was no time to study them. Within hours, the Vex had taken control of every major city on Earth. Millions died in the first day alone. 2 weeks after the invasion, Stone led what remained of his unit through the ruins of Chicago. The once mighty city was unnaturally quiet. No birds, no insects. Even the wind seemed afraid to blow. Movement ahead, whispered Anna Frost, the former diplomat who had become one of Stone's most trusted soldiers. Her blonde hair was now cut, short and dirty, her once manicured hands wrapped around a rifle. Stone raised his fist, signaling the team to stop. Through his scope, he saw a Vex patrol marching 3 humans toward a large structure that had been built in the center of what was once Grant Park. The building pulsed with an eerie blue light. Processing center, Tom murmured. They had seen them before, these strange structures that appeared in every captured city. Humans went in. Nothing came out. We need to know what's happening in there, Stone decided. Doctor? Emma nodded grimly. She had been arguing for this mission for days. If we're going to fight them, we need to understand them. The inside of the processing center was worse than any of them had imagined. Humans were lined up in rows, connected to machines that glowed with the same blue light as the building. But it wasn't the machines that made Stone's blood run cold. It was the expressions on the people's faces. Pure terror, frozen in place as something was slowly drained from them. They're harvesting something, Emma whispered, her scientific curiosity temporarily overcoming her horror. She pulled out a small device of her own design and began taking readings. We need to help them, Anna said, raising her weapon. Stone put a hand on her arm. There are hundreds. We'd never make it. We need to understand first, then come back with a plan. A scream cut through the air as a new batch of prisoners was brought in. Among them was a child, no more than 10 years old. Something in Stone snapped. New plan, he growled. We take as many as we can. Now. The next few minutes were chaos. Gunfire, screams, the strange high-pitched whine of Vex weapons. Stone's team managed to free 23 people before they had to retreat. As they ran through the underground tunnels that had become humanity's new roads, Emma couldn't stop staring at her readings. What is it? Stone asked once they were safe in their hidden base, an old subway station 40 feet below the city. I don't know how to explain this, Emma said, her voice shaking slightly. But according to these readings, they're not just killing people. They're extracting something that my instruments can only register as neural energy. They're taking their souls? Anna asked, her face pale. I don't believe in souls, Emma replied. But something about human brainwave patterns is valuable to them, and there's something else. She pulled up another reading on her device. When the Vex tech interfaces with human neural patterns, there's a strange feedback loop that doesn't seem to happen with their other conquered species. How do you know about other species? Tom asked. Emma pointed to markings on the wall of the processing center, visible in the photos she'd taken. This isn't their first rodeo. These are tallies. Dozens of worlds, dozens of species. So what? Makes us different? Stone asked, cleaning blood from a cut on his arm. I don't know yet, Emma admitted. But I think it might be our only advantage. As the small group of survivors tended to their wounds and the rescued prisoners, none of them noticed that one of Emma's devices was still active, its readings growing stronger by the minute. None of them realized that whatever made humans unique, whatever created that strange feedback loop, was growing stronger in response to the Vex presence. Something was waking up inside humanity, something the Vex, with all their terrible power, would learn to fear. 3 months passed since the day the sky turned black with Vex ships. 3 months of hiding, fighting, and dying. But also 3 months of learning. Dr. Emma Reed hadn't slept properly in weeks. Her makeshift lab in the abandoned subway station was lit by a mix of salvaged LED lights and old emergency lamps that cast long shadows across the walls. Papers covered in complex diagrams and hastily scrawled notes were taped everywhere. In the center of it all sat a piece of Vex technology, a SCI neural interface device they had managed to steal during their third raid on a processing center. You need to rest, said Tom Miller, placing a cup of something that vaguely resembled coffee next to her. Emma didn't look up from her microscope. Can't. I'm close to something. I can feel it. Tom sighed and leaned against the table. Close. To what exactly? We've been studying this thing for weeks and all we've learned is that it gives people headaches and nosebleeds. That's not all, Emma muttered. She finally looked up, her eyes bloodshot, but bright with excitement. The headaches are happening because the device is trying to connect with our brains, but there's a mismatch. Like trying to plug something into the wrong socket. And that's good news? Tom raised an eyebrow. It means they didn't design their tech to work with humans, which means they didn't expect whatever it is about our brains that makes us different. Emma stood up suddenly, wincing as her stiff muscles protested. Get Stone. And Anna. They need to see this. Captain Stone arrived 20 minutes later with Anna Frost. Both were covered in dirt and looked exhausted. They had been scouting a new Vex outpost to the north. This better be good, Doc, Stone said, his voice rough from breathing in too much dust and smoke. We've got movement topside. More of those harvester units moving into the suburbs. Emma nodded and led them to a small side room where a volunteer from their group, a former electrician named Paul, was sitting with electrodes attached to his temples. Meet our first successful interface, Emma said proudly. Paul gave a weak smile and raised his hand in greeting. The movement caused a small device on the table next to him to light up and hover a few inches off the surface. Stone's eyes widened. Is he controlling that? Yes and no, Emma explained. The Vex tech doesn't work like our technology. It doesn't respond to direct commands. It's more intuitive. Paul here is thinking about how it would feel if the device moved and the device responds. That's impressive, Anna said cautiously. But how does this help us fight them? Emma's smile widened. Because this is just the beginning. I've managed to modify the interface to work with human neural patterns. And I've discovered something incredible. She moved to a computer screen and pulled up 2 brain scans side by side. This is a normal human brain, she said, pointing to the image on the left. And this is Paul's brain after 30 minutes connected to the modified interface. The differences were subtle, but unmistakable. Certain areas glowed brighter, new connections forming between regions that normally didn't communicate. What are we looking at? Stone asked, stepping closer. Evolution, Emma replied simply. Rapid, directed evolution of neural pathways. The interface is changing him, but not in the way the Vex intended. It's like our brains are rewiring themselves to not just use their technology, but to improve upon it. Tom frowned. Wait, are you saying the Vex tech is making us smarter? Not exactly, Emma said. It's making us different, accessing parts of our brains we normally don't use. And here's the kicker. She pulled up another scan. This is what happened when we captured that Vex soldier last week, and I briefly connected it to the interface. The alien brain scan was dramatically different from a human's, but one thing was clear. There were areas of damage, like tiny electrical burns. Our patterns hurt them, Emma said quietly. Something about the way human minds work is inherently incompatible with, maybe even hostile to, their neural structure. Stone looked at Paul with new interest. Can he access their systems? Their networks? Theoretically, yes, Emma nodded, but we need more practice, more volunteers, and she hesitated. And what? Anna pressed. And we need to understand what we're actually doing, Emma admitted. Because whatever this is, it's not just technology. The Vex aren't just harvesting people for labor or resources. They're harvesting something else. 2 days later, Stone led a team into a smaller processing center on the outskirts of what used to be a quiet suburban neighborhood. With them was Paul, wearing Emma's modified interface device. 3 other volunteers, a former nurse named Lisa, a college student called Mark, and an ex-cop named David, also wore the devices. Remember, we're here for information, Stone reminded them as they approached the building. Get in, connect to their system, download whatever you can and get out. No heroics. The 4 interface users nodded, their expressions a mix of determination and fear. Emma had warned them that prolonged connection could cause side effects, nosebleeds, migraines, possibly worse. 30 minutes max, Tom added, checking his watch. After that, I'm pulling the plug whether you're done or not. The raid started well. Stone's team had become efficient at avoiding Vex patrols, and the processing center was less heavily guarded than the larger ones in the city center. They made it to the central control node without being detected. Paul went first, pressing his palm against the smooth surface of what they had identified as an access terminal. The modified interface on his head hummed softly as it established a connection. His eyes fluttered closed, then opened again, but they were different. The pupils expanded until they were almost all black. I can see it, he whispered, his voice filled with awe. Their network. It's beautiful. One by one, the other 3 volunteers connected. Their expressions changed from concentration to wonder to horror as they accessed the Vex system. They call it soul fire, Lisa said suddenly, her voice distant. The energy they harvest from sentient beings. It feeds something in the void. Gods, Mark whispered. They worship void gods, ancient entities that promise power in exchange for soul fire. Dozens of worlds, David added, his voice breaking. They've harvested dozens of worlds before ours. Stone exchanged worried glances with Anna and Tom. This was more than they had expected to learn, and none of it was good news. Ask about weaknesses, Stone urged. How do we fight them? The 4 volunteers were silent for a moment, seemingly searching through the vast network. Then simultaneously, all 4 began to bleed from their noses. Something's wrong, Tom said, moving forward to disconnect them. Their vital signs are spiking. Before he could reach them, Paul's eyes snapped fully open, now completely black. They fear us, he said, but his voice had changed, becoming deeper, almost echoing. Humans are different. Our minds don't just resist them. They can channel something else, something they've been running from for millennia. We need to go, Stone said urgently as alarms began to sound throughout the facility. Now! They disconnected the volunteers and retreated, fighting their way out through suddenly alert Vex guards. By the time they made it back to their hideout, Paul and the others were unconscious but still alive. Emma worked tirelessly to stabilize them, monitoring their brain activity with growing concern. What did they mean? Stone asked her later as they watched the 4 volunteers sleeping fitfully. About channeling something else? Emma shook her head, her expression troubled. I don't know, but their brain scans show even more changes now. It's like they opened a door to something. And whatever it is, I don't think it can be closed again. In his sleep, Paul smiled, his eyes moving rapidly behind closed lids as if seeing something wonderful and terrible. Around his bed, the lights flickered briefly, and for just a moment the air seemed to shimmer with an energy that hadn't been there before. The Vex had brought hell to Earth, but humanity, it seemed, had something worse waiting to be unleashed. The map spread across the old subway maintenance table showed the remains of what used to be Chicago. Red X marks indicated Vex strongholds. Blue circles marked resistance safe houses. Green stars represented successful strike points over the past 2 weeks. There were 12 green stars. Captain James Stone placed a 13th green star on the map and stepped back, allowing himself a small smile. The ammunition depot near the old museum is down. That makes 13 hits with 0 casualties on our side. Anna Frost nodded approvingly. The Vex are getting sloppy. They didn't expect resistance to last this long, let alone grow stronger. They didn't expect the interfaces, Tom Miller corrected, glancing toward the side chamber where 20 volunteers now trained daily with Dr. Reed's improved neural devices. What had started as 4 test subjects had grown into what Stone called their Special Weapons Division. Emma Reed entered the command room, looking tired but satisfied. Unlike the early prototype, her latest neural interfaces were smaller, more elegant, silver circlets that fit comfortably around the wearers' heads. No more nosebleeds, no more migraines. At least not for the humans. How are they doing? Stone asked. Better than expected, Emma replied. Paul can now disable a Vex security system from half a mile away. Lisa has learned to redirect their communication signals, and Mark can actually control their smaller units for short periods. The implications hung in the air. What had begun as desperate guerrilla attacks had evolved into something much more effective. The human resistance was no longer just surviving, they were starting to win. General Krath stood perfectly still as the human resistance destroyed another outpost. Through the eyes of his soldiers, he watched the small band of fighters move with surprising coordination. Some wielded conventional weapons, but others merely stood back, their eyes dark, their heads adorned with strange devices. These were the troubling ones, the ones who could reach into Vex systems with their minds, the ones who caused his soldiers to malfunction, to turn on each other, to simply shut down. This should not be possible, Krath said to the empty command chamber. His voice was like grinding metal, each word precisely formed. They are lesser beings, prey species. The holographic display showed another Vex unit falling under human control, turning its weapons on its companions. Krath felt something unfamiliar stirring within. The humans would call it fear. The Vex had no word for it. Increase harvesting operations, he commanded. Double the soul fire extraction quotas. The Void Lords must be appeased if we are to receive their guidance. The chamber's automated systems acknowledged the command, but Krath detected hesitation in the machine's response. Even his own technology was being affected by these humans. And bring me one of them, he added, one with the mind device. I must understand what we face. David, the former police officer, led a small team through the underground tunnels. Their mission was simple: plant interface disruptors at key points in the Vex network. These small devices developed by Emma and Tom would create areas where the Vex couldn't communicate with each other, blind spots in their otherwise perfect surveillance. 2 minutes, David whispered to the 3 fighters accompanying him. The silver circlet on his head hummed softly as he extended his senses, feeling for Vex presences nearby. There's a patrol coming. 2 units, standard configuration. The team pressed themselves against the walls of the tunnel, weapons ready. David closed his eyes, focusing on the approaching Vex soldiers. With the improved interface, he could now not only detect them but also sense their intentions, their programming. Wait, he said suddenly. Something's wrong, they know. The wall beside them exploded inward. Not the 2 Vex soldiers they had sensed, but a massive harvester unit. 9 feet tall with multiple limbs ending in various tools and weapons. It moved with terrible speed, grabbing the nearest human fighter before anyone could react. Ambush. David shouted, reaching out with his mind to try to disrupt the Harvester's systems. But this unit was different, shielded somehow against his mental intrusion. In seconds, 2 of the fighters were down. The third managed to fire a plasma rifle, salvaged and modified Vex technology, that tore through one of the Harvester's limbs. David pulled his own weapon, but before he could use it, something struck him from behind. As consciousness faded, his last thought was to activate the interface's emergency beacon. Then darkness took him. They took David. Emma's voice was flat, controlled, but her hands shook as she showed the team the data from his interface's final transmission. And they did it deliberately. This wasn't a random patrol, it was a targeted abduction. Stone slammed his fist on the table. They're adapting to us. We need to get him back, said Lisa, her eyes now permanently darkened around the edges from prolonged interface use. They'll try to extract information. Worse, said Paul quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Of all the interface users, he had connected the deepest with the Vex systems, sometimes spending days in a trance-like state, navigating their network. They'll try to understand how we're doing what we're doing. They fear it. Fear what exactly? Anna asked the question. They'd all been wondering. What is it that we're channeling when we use these interfaces? Paul exchanged glances with Emma, who nodded slightly. It was time to tell them. We call them the Bright, Paul explained. That's the closest translation we can manage. They exist, in a dimension parallel to ours, a place of pure energy and consciousness. The Vex and their Void Lords have been at war with the Bright for millennia, and somehow humans can, what? Connect to these bright things? Stone looked skeptical. Emma took over. It's our neural structure. Humans have a unique pattern. Our brains are more chaotic than most species, more adaptable. The Vex harvest what they call soul fire from sentient beings, a kind of neural energy that feeds their Void Lords. But human soul fire has a different quality. It resonates with the Bright. Tom let out a low whistle. So we're not just fighting aliens. We're caught in the middle of some kind of cosmic war between dimension gods. Pretty much, Emma admitted. And now they have David. David woke strapped to a table that hummed with energy. His interface had been removed, leaving him feeling strangely hollow, disconnected. His head throbbed with pain, but he forced himself to focus, to observe. The chamber around him was unlike any Vex facility he had seen before. The walls pulsed with dark energy, and in the center of the room stood General Krath himself. David recognized him from the Resistance's intelligence reports, the regional commander of Vex forces, a being of singular cruelty and efficiency. You are awake, Krath observed. His voice sounded like metal grinding on stone. Good. Unconscious. Subjects provide inadequate data. David said nothing, conserving his strength, assessing his situation. Your kind has caused difficulties, Krath continued, moving closer. This is unexpected, unprecedented. You should have been harvested. By now your world stripped of all useful resources, your soul fire feeding the glory of the Void Lords. Sorry to disappoint, David managed to say, his voice hoarse. Krath made a sound that might have been laughter. You misunderstand. This is not disappointment. This is opportunity. Your species has demonstrated qualities that may be of interest to my masters. A smaller Vex entered the chamber, carrying a device that looked disturbingly similar to Emma's interfaces, but corrupted somehow, twisted with additions that made David's skin crawl. We have studied your technology, Krath said. Primitive, but effective. Now we will study you. The smaller Vex approached, the dark interface in its hands. David struggled against his restraints, but they held firm. As the device was placed, on his head he closed his eyes and focused on one thing, the training Paul had given all interface users for worst-case scenarios. If you're ever captured, Paul had told them, and they try to connect you to their tech, don't fight it. Instead, become a door. Open yourself completely. The dark interface activated, and David screamed. But not from pain. From the rush of power as he threw his mind wide open, becoming not a prisoner but a gateway. Through him, for just a moment, the Bright looked directly at General Krath, and for the first time in his long existence, the Vex commander knew true fear. Alarms blared throughout the facility as systems overloaded, as reality itself seemed to warp around the interrogation chamber, and in the heart of the Vex stronghold something began to wake up. The counterstrike had begun, but not in the way the resistance had planned. This was something else. Something worse than anything the Vex had brought to Earth. This was humanity's true power unleashed. The rescue team moved through the ruins of what had once been downtown Chicago, their faces grim with determination. Captain Stone led the way, with Anna and Tom flanking him. Behind them came Paul, Lisa, and Mark, the three strongest interface users. All of them wore the silver circlets that connected them to both Vex technology and something else, something from beyond. "The signal's getting stronger," Lisa whispered, her eyes partly closed as she focused on the faint beacon from David's interface. "He's still alive, but there's something else, something big happening around him." The sky above them had taken on a strange quality, not quite the natural blue of Earth's atmosphere, nor the dark pollution of Vex occupation. It shimmered with occasional flashes of light, like heat lightning in impossible colors. "That's new," Anna remarked, looking up with concern. "What are they doing up there?" Paul's expression was distant, his mind partly connected to the Vex network. "It's not them. It's us. It's what David did." Stone stopped and turned to face the interface users. "Explain now." Paul took a deep breath. "When the Vex connected David to their systems, he followed the emergency protocol. He opened himself completely, became a gateway." "A gateway to what?" Tom asked, though his face suggested he already feared the answer. "To the Bright," Paul replied. "Simply, David opened a direct connection, bigger than anything we've managed before, and now the Bright are coming through." As if in response to his words, the ground trembled beneath their feet. In the distance, toward the center of the city, where the largest Vex processing center stood, a column of light shot upward into the strange sky. "We need to move," Stone ordered. "Now." General Krath had abandoned the interrogation chamber, but it was too late. The human subject, David, still lay strapped to the table, the modified interface on his head now glowing, with a light that should not exist in the physical world. Around him, reality itself seemed to be thinning. "Containment protocols have failed," reported a lesser Vex commander. "The breach is expanding." Krath moved through the corridors of his command center, his mechanical body operating at peak efficiency, despite the chaos around him. Vex soldiers scrambled to defensive positions as systems failed all around them. For the first time in the invasion, they were not the predators. They were prey. The Void Lords must be informed, Krath decided. This development exceeds standard operational parameters. He reached the central chamber of the processing center, where the harvested soulfire was collected and channeled. The massive container glowed with blue-black energy, the accumulated neural patterns of thousands of human victims. Krath connected directly to the container, preparing to send an emergency transmission to his masters in the void. But as his consciousness touched the harvested energy, he recoiled in shock. The human soulfire had changed. It was no longer the docile energy source they had been collecting. It had become active, aware, and it reached back toward him with terrible purpose. For the first time, Krath knew what the humans called fear. The rescue team fought their way through increasingly disorganized Vex patrols. Something was wrong with the alien soldiers. They moved erratically, sometimes attacking each other, sometimes simply shutting down mid-stride. "Their network is collapsing," Mark explained as they ran. "Whatever David did, it's spreading through their entire system." They reached the outer perimeter of the main processing center. The massive structure now pulsed with competing energies, the familiar blue-black of Vex technology and a new white-gold radiance that seemed to be eating away at the building from within. "There," Lisa pointed. "10th floor. That's where David..." Stone assessed the situation. The main entrance was heavily guarded despite the chaos. We need a distraction. We can do better than that, Paul said quietly. The three interface users looked at each other, some unspoken communication passing between them. We can open more doors. Before Stone could ask what he meant, the three of them sat down in a small circle, their interfaces humming as they joined. Hands. Their eyes closed, then opened again, now glowing with the same white-gold light that emanated from parts of the building. "What are you doing?" Anna asked, her voice tight with concern. "What we were meant to do," Lisa answered, her voice overlaid with something else, something older and vaster than human speech. "What humans have always been able to do. Open doors." The air around them began to shimmer, reality bending slightly as if seen through heat waves. Then the world tore. There was no other word for it. A vertical split appeared in the empty space before them, revealing not the expected darkness, but a realm of pure, radiant energy. Through the tier stepped a figure. It was vaguely humanoid, but composed entirely of light, white at its core, gold at its edges, constantly shifting and reforming. More tiers appeared around the building, more light beings stepping through. "What are they?" Stone whispered, his hand instinctively going to his weapon. "The Bright," Mark replied, his voice also changed, resonating with power. "The enemies of the Void Lords, the balance to the darkness the Vex serve, and now, our allies." The light beings moved toward the Vex guards, who fired their weapons in desperation. The energy blasts passed harmlessly through the luminous forms. When the Bright reached the Vex, they simply merged with them. The alien soldiers convulsed, light pouring from every joint in their mechanical bodies before collapsing. "Now we can get to David," Paul said, standing up shakily. The three interface users looked drained but determined. "The path is clear." David was no longer fully human when they found him. The modified Vex interface had partially merged with his head, tendrils of alien technology extending into his skull. But his eyes, when they opened, were clear and aware. "You came," he said simply as Stone cut through his restraints. "Of course we did," Stone replied. "Can you walk?" David sat up slowly. "I don't know if walking matters anymore. Things have changed. I've changed." Around them, the building shuddered as battles raged throughout its structure. The Bright moved through walls as if they weren't there, hunting down Vex soldiers and commanders. The processing chambers were being systematically destroyed, the harvested soul fire released back into the atmosphere. "We need to find Krath," David said suddenly. "He's trying to contact the Void Lords. If he succeeds, they'll come through. And that would be bad." Tom helped David to his feet. "Worse than what's happening now?" David's modified interface pulsed with light. "Much worse. The Bright are powerful, but they're just advanced scouts. The Void Lords are gods. Ancient, hungry gods." Stone nodded, grimly. "Then we stop him. Where?" David closed his eyes for a moment, connecting to what remained of the Vex network. "Central chamber, top floor. But we need to hurry. He's already started the summoning." They found Krath in a massive circular room dominated by a swirling portal of darkness. Unlike the clean tiers through which the Bright had entered, this was a jagged wound in reality, leaking shadows that seemed to consume the light around them. The Vex general stood before it, his mechanical body transformed. Parts of him glowed with the same light as the Bright, while others had become even darker, absorbing all illumination. He was caught between two forces being torn apart by their conflict. "You are too late," Krath said as they entered, his voice now a discordant mixture of tones. "The void beckons, my masters come." Through the dark portal, something massive began to take shape, a being of such profound wrongness that looking at it caused physical pain. "We can't fight that," Anna whispered, raising her weapon anyway. "We don't have to fight it," David said, stepping forward. The modified interface on his head now glowed brightly enough to illuminate the entire chamber. "We just need to close the door." He looked back at his friends, a sad smile on his face. "And sometimes to close a door. You have to sacrifice the key. Before anyone could stop him, David ran toward the portal. Krath moved to intercept him, but Paul, Lisa, and Mark raised their hands in unison, their interfaces flaring. The Vex general froze in place, caught in their combined mental grip. "David!" "No!" Stone shouted, but it was too late. David leaped into the portal, directly at the forming shape of the Void Lord. As he made contact, the modified interface on his head exploded with light. The darkness recoiled, the portal beginning to collapse in on itself. "Channel the bright." David's voice echoed from within the shrinking darkness. "All of you, now!" The three interface users joined hands again, their minds reaching out not just to each other, but to all the light beings that had entered the world. Throughout the building, throughout the city, the bright turned their attention to the portal. Light met darkness in a collision that shouldn't have been possible in the physical world. The portal shrunk further, the massive shape within it retreating, pulled back by David's sacrifice. With a final flash that temporarily blinded everyone in the room, the portal closed. Where it had been, a small pulsing spot of perfect balance remained, neither light nor dark, but something in between. As vision returned, Stone saw Krath lying on the floor, his mechanical body now inert. The general had not survived being the battlefield between such cosmic forces. "David?" Anna called, looking around desperately. "Where's David?" Paul shook his head, tears in his glowing eyes. "He's gone. But not dead. Not exactly." He pointed to the pulsing spot where the portal had been. "He's there, holding the door closed for now." "For now?" Stone asked. "This isn't over," Lisa said quietly. "The Void Lords know about us now. They'll try again, and the Bright won't leave either. Earth has become something new, a battleground between ancient powers." Mark nodded solemnly. "And humans are the keys to both realms, the bridges between dimensions. The Vex didn't understand what they were waking when they came here." Stone looked at the spot where his friend had sacrificed himself, then at the interface users whose humanity was becoming less certain with each passing hour. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now," Paul replied, his voice echoing with the voices of the Bright, "everything changes." 1 month after the battle at the Chicago Processing Center, the world was unrecognizable, not just from the destruction the Vex had brought, but from what had followed. Captain James Stone stood on the roof of what had once been the North American Defense Command, the same spot where he had first seen the Vex ships darkening the sky. Now he watched a different sky, one where reality itself seemed thinner, where colors that had no names occasionally rippled across the blue expanse. "It's beautiful, in a way," said Anna Frost, joining him at the railing. Her blonde hair had grown out slightly, now streaked with premature gray from the stress of recent months. "Beautiful and terrifying," Stone replied, "just like everything else these days." Below them, the former military base had been transformed into something new, a combination of command center, research facility, and embassy. Humans worked alongside, beings of pure light, the Bright who had chosen to remain in the physical world after the Vex retreat. 3 weeks ago, the alien invaders had suddenly abandoned Earth. Their ships had lifted off without warning, leaving behind their structures and some of their technology. No one was naive enough to believe they had given up. This was merely a strategic withdrawal. "Dr. Reed wants to see you," Anna said after a moment of silence. "She says they've made a breakthrough with the portal." Stone nodded and followed her, back inside. The corridors were busy with activity as humans and Bright moved with purpose. Some of the humans wore the silver interfaces, their eyes glowing slightly with inner light. These were the bridges, as they now called themselves. Humans, who could channel the Bright and serve as conduits between dimensions. Emma Reed's laboratory had expanded to take up an entire wing of the building. When Stone entered, he found her standing before a familiar pulsing spot of balanced energy. A perfect replica of the one in Chicago where David had sacrificed himself. "You've recreated it," Stone observed. Emma turned to him, her face lighting up with excitement. She looked younger somehow, energized by the incredible discoveries of recent weeks. Better than that, we've stabilized it. A permanent gateway that doesn't require a human sacrifice to maintain. Beside her stood Paul, Lisa, and Mark, the first and still the strongest of the bridges. Their appearances had continued to change. They looked mostly human, but their skin occasionally rippled with light just beneath the surface, and their eyes had become pools of radiance. "Can we use it to reach David?" Stone asked the question that had been burning inside him since that terrible day. "We already have," Paul replied, his voice carrying that strange harmonic quality that all the bridges developed over time. "Not physically, but we've made contact. He's unchanged but still himself in the ways that matter." "He holds a critical position now," Lisa added. "He exists at the exact boundary between our world, the realm of the bright and the void. He sees everything. And what he sees is coming to warn us about," Mark finished. A chill ran down Stone's spine. "The Vex are coming back." "Not just the Vex," Emma said grimly. "They've gone to their masters. The Void Lords are preparing a direct assault." "How long do we have?" "A few months, maybe less," Paul replied. "But we won't face them alone." He gestured toward the stabilized portal. As Stone watched, it expanded slightly, and through it stepped a bright unlike any he had seen before. This one was larger, its light more intense, its form more clearly defined, almost human in shape, but composed entirely of radiant energy. "Captain Stone," the being said, its voice resonating not through the air but directly in Stone's mind. "I am Luminar, emissary of the Council of Light. Your friend David speaks highly of you." Stone fought the urge to step back. You can talk to David?" "He is with us now, in a manner of speaking," Luminar replied. "He has become something new, neither human nor bright nor void, but a bridge between all realms. Through him, we have learned much about humanity. And through him," Emma added, "we've learned how to fight back when the Void Lords come." The next few months passed in a blur of preparation. All across the world, humans with the right neural patterns were identified and offered the choice to become bridges. Most accepted. The alternative, annihilation by the Void Lords, was a powerful motivator. Other humans worked to adapt Vex technology, combining it with the knowledge shared by the Bright to create new weapons, new defenses, new ways of perceiving reality. Stone found himself in charge of what they now called the Boundary Force, a military unit composed of both human fighters and bright warriors, training together for the coming conflict. It was strange work, teaching beings of pure energy how to coordinate with flesh and blood soldiers, but it was necessary. "They respect you," Tom Miller told him one evening as they reviewed training footage. "Both sides. The humans because you've led them through hell already. The Bright because you don't fear them." Stone gave a short laugh. "Who says I don't fear them?" "You're cautious around them, sure," Tom replied. "But you don't show the fear that most people do. You look them in. Well, not eyes exactly, but you face them directly. They value that." Before Stone could respond, alarms blared throughout the base. They rushed to the command center, where Emma and the senior bridges were already gathered around a large display. "It's happening," Emma said without preamble. "Multiple reality breaches detected. The void is coming through." The display showed points of darkness appearing around the globe. Dozens, then hundreds of tears in the fabric of reality, each one leaking shadows into the world. "Earlier than we expected," Paul said, his light flickering with concern. "They must have found a way to accelerate their preparations." Through one of the tiers, massive shapes began to emerge. Vex ships, but changed, corrupted by void energy. Behind them came larger, darker forms that the sensors struggled to track. "The Void Lords," Luminar said, the bright emissary's light dimming slightly at the sight. "3 of them. More than we anticipated." Stone looked at the display, at the overwhelming forces arrayed against Earth, and felt a moment of pure despair. Then he straightened his shoulders. "We stick to the plan. Activate all bridges, deploy the boundary forces. This ends today, one way or another." The battle that followed would later be called the Convergence by some, the illumination by others. It was fought not just with conventional weapons or even Vex technology, but with reality itself as the battlefield. Stone led a strike team to what had once been the Vex Command Center in Chicago, where the original portal still pulsed with balanced energy. According to the intelligence provided by David through the Bright, this spot had become a nexus, a point where all dimensions touched most closely. If we can amplify the portal, Emma had explained, we can create a reset point, a place where the rules of reality can be rewritten. It sounded like madness, but so did everything else these days. The strike team fought their way through waves of void-corrupted Vex soldiers. The Bright members of the team engaged directly with tendrils of pure darkness that reached through lesser tiers in reality, holding them back long enough for the humans to advance. Stone, Emma, and the three original bridges finally reached the portal chamber. It looked much as it had when David had sacrificed himself, except now the pulsing spot had grown, becoming a perfect sphere of neither light nor darkness. "David?" Stone called out, unsure if his friend could hear him. "We're here." The sphere rippled, and for just a moment Stone thought he saw a face within it. David's face, but transformed, transcended. "He hears you," Paul confirmed. "He's been waiting for this moment." Emma quickly set up the equipment they had brought, a combination of modified Vex technology and devices created with knowledge from the Bright. "This will amplify the portal's natural properties," she explained as she worked. "If David can hold the center point, we can create a new equilibrium between the dimensions." Outside, the battle raged. Through their mental link with the Bright, they could sense the Void Lords pushing deeper into reality, their immense power warping everything around them. "Ready," Emma announced finally. "The amplifiers are set." The three bridges took positions around the sphere, their interfaces glowing brightly as they placed their hands upon the equipment. Stone and Emma stepped back, watching as energy began to flow between the bridges and the portal. "Now!" Paul shouted, his voice echoing with the voices of countless Bright. "David, now!" The sphere expanded suddenly, engulfing the three bridges. Stone moved to help them, but Emma held him back. "This is what has to happen," she said, tears in her eyes. They knew. They've always known. The sphere continued to grow, passing harmlessly through Stone and Emma, then through the walls of the building, expanding outward at an impossible speed. As it passed, it changed things. Not dramatically, but subtly. The tiers in reality sealed themselves. The corruption of the void receded. Through the mental link that all humans now seemed to share at some level, Stone could sense the Void Lords screaming in rage as they were pushed back, forced to retreat from a reality that suddenly refused to accommodate their existence. When the sphere had expanded to encompass the entire planet, there was a moment of perfect stillness. Then, softly at first, but building rapidly, a sound like a crystal bell ringing filled the air. The sphere began to shrink again, condensing not back to its original size, but into something new. Where the four bridges, David, Paul, Lisa, and Mark, had been, there now stood a single entity. It looked human in form, but its substance was something else entirely, a perfect balance of light and darkness, constantly flowing and shifting but never tipping toward either extreme. What are you?" Stone asked, his voice barely a whisper. The being smiled with four familiar faces somehow overlaid into one. "We are the fulcrum," it said with a voice that was both one and many. "The balance point. Neither bright nor void, but something new, something that can exist only because of what humans are. The perfect bridges between extremes." Emma stepped forward cautiously. "Our friends, are they still?" "We are still ourselves," the fulcrum assured her, "but we are also more. And through us, reality has been adjusted. The Void Lords cannot enter this world directly now. The Bright must follow certain rules to maintain their presence here. And humans." It paused, looking at Stone and Emma with eyes that held the wisdom of multiple dimensions. "Humans will become what they were always meant to be. Mediators, bridges, the species that stands at the center of all things." Stone felt a weight lift from his shoulders, the burden of fighting an impossible war suddenly replaced by something else. A purpose. A future. So it's over? We won? The Fulcrum's smile turned sad. The immediate threat is over. But this isn't an ending, James. It's a beginning. Everything changes from this moment. Earth is now the Nexus world, the center of a new reality where dimensions meet and balance each other. There will be challenges, adjustments, new threats and new allies. But we'll face them together, Emma said firmly. Yes, the Fulcrum agreed. Together. That is humanity's greatest strength, the ability to stand between extremes, to adapt, to change, to embrace both light and darkness without being consumed by either. As the Fulcrum spoke, Stone became aware of changes happening across the planet. The strange sky was settling into something new, still Earth's familiar blue, but now occasionally shimmering with hints of other realities just beyond perception. The remaining Vex structures were transforming, their alien geometry softening into something that could serve as conduits between dimensions rather than harvesting centers. And most importantly, he could feel humanity changing. Not physically, but mentally, spiritually. The barriers between minds were becoming more permeable, allowing for a level of understanding and empathy that had never existed before, while still preserving the individual identity that made each person unique. The Vex had brought hell to Earth. Humanity had responded with something worse, at least from the perspective of the invaders. They had brought change, adaptation, evolution, the very qualities that the Void Lords and their servants feared most. So what happens now? Stone asked, echoing the question he had asked a month ago when everything seemed darkest. The Fulcrum gestured to the world outside, a world transformed, a world reborn. Now we build something new, something that has never existed before, a reality where all dimensions can touch without destroying each other, a universe where balance prevails. Everything changes, Emma said softly, understanding dawning in her eyes. Everything already has, the Fulcrum replied, and it will keep changing. That's what makes it beautiful. Stone looked out at the new world, still familiar enough to be home, yet transformed into something greater than it had been before. The Vex had brought hell thinking to conquer and consume. Instead, they had triggered an evolution they could never have predicted. In trying to end humanity, they had instead helped it transcend. And now, everything had changed. Forever.